Antes de empezar, me gustaría pedirles un pequeño favor. Estoy esforzándome mucho para alcanzar la marca de 1000 suscriptores, una cifra realmente significativa para mí. Por favor, pulsen el botón de suscribirse al canal. Solo un clic, pero es una motivación enorme para que siga haciendo videos. Muchas gracias. Arthur Wensrzegał whirled through the lens of numbers, perched at the pinnacle of his corporate empire. His office, more akin to a minimalist art gallery than a workplace, was where he spent his days dissecting spreadsheets, stock charts, and profit reports. Each digit whispered a tale of performance, loss, or growth. Stories he understood, stories he could control. Human emotions, on the other hand, were a chaotic, unpredictable dataset he avoided with the same diligence his accountants avoided taxes. His life was a fortress built on wealth and distance. His marriage had crumbled years ago, a casualty of his perpetual absence and emotional chill. His adult children resided on different continents, their communication reduced to perfunctory birthday and holiday calls. Arthur had convinced himself this was for the best. Relationships were messy. Love was a commitment with no guaranteed return on investment. He preferred the clean, stark logic of business. Among his many assets was a gilded compass, an exclusive restaurant, the crown jewel of his hotel portfolio. He rarely visited, treating it like another line item on a balance sheet. Yet, that evening, plagued by a pervasive ennui and a nameless void, he decided on an unscheduled visit. He dressed in an understated yet expensive suit and drove himself, a rarity, foregoing his chauffeur. He wanted to be an observer, an anonymous figure in the crowd, not an owner conducting an inspection. He settled at a discreet corner table, offering a panoramic view of the room. The interior was precisely as he'd approved. The lighting was warm and intimate. Soft classical music permeated the air, and the staff moved with a hushed balletic precision. Everything hummed like a well-oiled machine. A flicker of pride, quickly followed by the familiar pang of weariness. Another success. Another hollow digit. His attention was drawn to a waitress attending a table in the center of the room. She was slender, moved with grace, yet her posture held a weariness that bled through her professional smile. He watched her for several minutes. He noticed the minute details. The way her fingers tightened momentarily on her tray when she thought no one was looking. The almost imperceptible tremor in her hand as she poured wine. A quick, furtive glance at a small, worn locket around her neck, as if drawing strength from it. Her name was Klara, he overheard when a colleague addressed her. At her table sat 3 men. They were loud, boorish, and dressed in a manner that screamed nouveau riche. Their laughter was too boisterous, their gestures too expansive. They treated Klara with open disdain, as if she were an invisible piece of furniture meant to cater to their whims. Arthur felt a prickle of irritation. He detested such lack of decorum in his establishment. It marred the atmosphere he so painstakingly cultivated. He watched as the men concluded their meal. Klara approached with the bill, placing it discreetly on the table. One of the men, portly and ruddy-faced, glanced at it and then let out a bark of laughter. "You must be joking, darling. We're not paying for this swill." Klara froze. Her smile vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief and fear. "I'm sorry, sir." "Was something wrong with the meal?" The second man, leaner, with a fox-like face, chimed in. Everything was wrong. The steak was like shoe leather. The wine tasted like vinegar and your service was, to put it mildly, slow. It was a blatant lie. Arthur had witnessed the men devouring their dishes with gusto, repeatedly praising the wine. Klara had been at their beck and call, always polite and efficient. Klara's voice trembled as she attempted to maintain her composure. "I'm so sorry to hear that. May I call the manager? Perhaps I can offer you some compensation?" "We don't want compensation," the third man growled. "We want to leave, and we're not paying for this pathetic evening." "Perhaps you'll learn to do your job better." Klara's face pallid. Arthur saw the panic in her eyes. He knew that in restaurants like this, the cost of an unpaid bill was often deducted from a waiter's wages. For these men, it was a cruel game, a display of power. For her, it could mean financial ruin. He rose from his table. He wasn't entirely sure what prompted him. In such a situation, he would normally have discreetly summoned security or instructed the manager to handle the matter without fanfare. But there was something in the woman's vulnerability and the men's sheer arrogance that struck a long-dormant nerve. Perhaps it was a memory of his own beginnings, decades ago, when he too had clawed for every penny, and knew the sting of humiliation at the hands of the richer and stronger. A approached the table, his presence immediately drawing their attention. Despite his understated attire, an aura of authority emanated from him, impossible to ignore. The men looked up at him with annoyance. "What's the problem?" one of them asked. Arthur ignored him and addressed Klara directly. His voice was calm but firm. "Are these gentlemen refusing to settle their bill?" Klara looked up at him, a mixture of fear and gratitude in her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak. "I see," Arthur said. He then turned his gaze to the three men. His stare was ice cold. "My name is Arthur Wens. I own this restaurant." The sudden silence that fell over the table was almost deafening. The arrogance drained from the men's faces, replaced by shock, then by a suffocating panic. They knew the name. Everyone in this city who had any business dealings knew the name Wens. They were like schoolchildren caught vandalizing by the principal. The ruddy-faced man who had spoken first tried to salvage the situation. "Mr. Wens, what an honor. We just had a small misunderstanding with the waitress. The food was exquisite. Absolutely exquisite." Arthur raised a hand, cutting off his pathetic lie. "I heard everything. I've been observing you since you sat down. You have been rude, demeaning, and now you are attempting to defraud a woman who earns her living serving those like you." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the now silent room where every patron's gaze was fixed on them. The men's humiliation was absolute and public. "This woman," Arthur continued, gesturing to Klara, "works harder in one night than you have likely worked in your entire lives. She shows you a respect that you clearly do not deserve. And in return for her professionalism, you offer cruelty." He walked to the table, pulled out his wallet, and placed several bills on it, far exceeding the amount of the bill. "This is a tip for Miss Klara. Your bill is settled. And now you have three options." His eyes narrowed. 1. You pay for the meal and apologize to this woman for your behavior. 2. You do not pay, but you apologize to her. In both cases, you are banned from all my establishments for life. There is a third option. You do not pay, you do not apologize, and you leave here accompanied by the police, whom I will gladly call on charges of attempted fraud. The men looked at each other. Their faces were now puced with rage and mortification. They were trapped. The ruddy-faced man threw a wad of bills onto the table, muttering something that might have been an apology. Louder. Arthur said, his voice cold, "I want Miss Klara to hear it." The man looked at Klara, avoiding her gaze. "I apologize," he spat out. "Excellent," Arthur replied. "And now, get out, and don't let me see you here again." The three men scrambled to their feet and practically fled the restaurant, their departure met with the disdainful glances of the other patrons. As soon as they were gone, a soft applause rippled through the room. Arthur turned to Klara. She stood as if frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. They were no longer tears of fear, but of relief, and of something he couldn't quite identify. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to. No one ever has." He silenced her with a gentle gesture. "Please, take the rest of the evening off. I'll handle it with the manager." Before she could protest, he walked away to speak with Thomas, the restaurant's manager, who had watched the entire scene with his mouth agape. Arthur explained the situation briefly and concisely, ensuring Klara would face no repercussions. As he left the restaurant, he saw her standing outside, in the cool night air. She approached him. "Mr. Wens, I truly don't know how to thank you. This money, it means more to me than you can imagine." Arthur looked at her. For the first time in years, he felt something beyond business calculation. He felt curiosity. "Why?" he asked, if he may. She hesitated for a moment, then opened the locket around her neck. Inside was a small photograph of a smiling boy, perhaps 6 years old, with large, serious eyes. "This my son, Leo," she said softly. "He's ill, very ill. He needs an operation that isn't covered. Every penny I earn goes towards his treatment. This bill, had I been forced to pay it, would have set me back weeks." Arthur gazed at the photograph. The boy's face was pale, but his smile was radiant. There was something in it that touched him deeply, something innocent and fragile that the world he inhabited seemed to crush without mercy. For the first time since his own mother's death, many years ago, Arthur felt a genuine, painful pang of empathy. "What kind of operation does he need?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Klara spoke of Leo's rare heart condition, of the list of specialists, of the costs that mounted like an insurmountable mountain. She spoke of sleepless nights, of the fear that was her constant companion, and of the desperate hope that kept her going. Arthur listened in silence. Numbers flashed through his mind, but this time they weren't profits and losses. They were treatment costs, survival rates, the years this little boy might lose. And for the first time in his life, he made a decision that had absolutely no business rationale. Tomorrow morning, at 9 de la mañana, be at my office, he said. Bring all of Leo's medical documentation. My assistant will schedule you. Klara looked at him, uncomprehending. But why? Arthur looked at the photograph in the locket, then into her tired, hopeful eyes. Because no one should have to fight for their child's life alone. We will find the best doctors. I will cover all the costs. In the weeks that followed, Arthur Wens underwent a transformation that no one, least of all himself, would have expected. He threw the full might of his resources and connections into the fight for Leo's health. His days were no longer filled with market analysis, but with consultations with pediatric cardiologists from around the globe. His office, usually sterile and silent, became a command center for a life-saving operation for one small boy. I visited Leo in the hospital. The boy was small and frail, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically, counting each beat of his weak heart. But when Leo smiled at him with that same radiant smile from the photograph, Arthur felt the ice shell he had built around his heart for decades crack. He sat by the boy's bedside, reading him stories of pirates and dragons. He told him tales of the far-off lands he had visited, and Leo listened with wide-eyed wonder. Klara watched them from the side, her gratitude slowly morphing into something deeper, a tenderness she was afraid to name. The operation took place at a specialist clinic in Switzerland. Arthur flew there with Klara and Leo. He waited with her in the corridor for 8 long hours that felt like an eternity. For the first time in years, he didn't think of money, of power, of his empire. He thought only of the tiny heart beating on the operating table. When the surgeon finally emerged from the room, weary but smiling, and announced that the surgery had been a success, Arthur felt a wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled his knees. Klara se lanzó a sus brazos, llorando y riendo a la vez, y él, para su sorpresa, la abrazó y la estrechó con fuerza, sintiendo cómo sus propios ojos se humedecían. La convalecencia de Leo fue larga, pero sus progresos, constantes. Arthur los visitaba a diario, llevaba juguetes, jugaba con Leo a juegos de mesa y charlaba con Klara de todo y de nada. Descubrió que sabía escuchar. Descubrió que cuidar de alguien más le proporcionaba una especie de satisfacción que ninguna operación comercial de éxito le había dado jamás. Unos meses después, en una cálida tarde de sol, los tres estaban en el parque. Leo, aunque todavía un poco pálido, corría por la hierba con una energía que nadie esperaba. Perseguía palomas y reía a carcajadas, y el sonido de su risa era para Arthur la música más hermosa. Estaba sentado en un banco junto a Klara, observando al niño. Klara había conseguido un puesto de gerente en uno de sus restaurantes, lo que le proporcionaba estabilidad financiera y un horario flexible, permitiéndole pasar más tiempo con su hijo. Su rostro había recuperado el color y en sus ojos ya no había rastro del antiguo miedo. «Nunca podré devolvértelo», dijo en voz baja, posando una mano en su brazo. Arthur la miró, y luego al Leo que corría. Sonrió, y era una sonrisa sincera, que nacía del corazón. «Klara», dijo, «soy yo quien te debe. Durante años construí un imperio de hormigón y acero, creyendo que eso era la fuerza. Y tú y Leo me habéis demostrado que el verdadero valor reside en las cosas que no se pueden comprar ni vender. Me habéis enseñado a sentir de nuevo». Leo corrió hacia ellos, sosteniendo un diente de león recién cortado. Con seriedad se lo entregó a Arthur. «Arthur». Arthur aceptó la flor, y sus dedos rozaron la pequeña mano cálida del niño. En aquel gesto sencillo, en aquel momento de silencio y sol, Arthur Wens, el multimillonario que lo tenía todo y no tenía nada, había encontrado finalmente su mayor tesoro. No estaba escrito en ninguna hoja de cálculo, sino en el latido sano de un corazón de niño y en la sonrisa de una mujer que le había enseñado que las inversiones más importantes son las que hacemos en los demás. Así, de las cenizas de la gélida soledad, nació una nueva e inesperada familia construida no sobre lazos de sangre, sino sobre un cimiento de compasión, valentía y amor.